Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. Today, Natalie and I are doing an episode together about tarot.
Yeah.
So, yes, this is like a long-awaited episode. So I'm excited to do this introduction because I think when I think about spirituality, tarot is one of those gateways where people come into more spiritual practices through a tarot reading. Usually, I'm guessing most people probably get a reading first and then decide they're going to do tarot themselves or learn to pull cards for themselves. So Natalie's here. She will share all the things about tarot. So you're going to learn today, want to hear about all the magic she's created in her life through tarot. I know for me, I want to share a little bit about what I've experienced as well, because to be honest, tarot's a bit intimidating to me when I think about all the cards and all the things you have to learn. It's not like an oracle deck that you can, just pull a card and read in the book what it is and then maybe extrapolate a little bit more information. It just feels so much deeper. Like there's so much meaning in these cards. So I'm really excited for people to learn from Natalie today because she's so well steeped in tarot, but also has a tarot school. So we'll talk about that. So it's just going to be all the things. So I hope this is a really great introduction to tarot and also helps maybe take some of the stigma around it being really complicated. I was intimidated, I think. Until you and I did a reading like 2 years ago for the first time, I was very intimidated. And I think I thought I needed to understand all these things about tarot to have it benefit me or even be able to experience it. And that is so not the case. And then I was kind of kicking myself that I hadn't explored before. So I hope this opens up for people who maybe are like on the fence and maybe also feel that intimidation. They feel really excited to seek out exploring the tarot on their own. So thank you for being here to have this chat with me today.
I love it. I get to be a guest now. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. It's a pleasure to be with
host and producer and all the things today. So I'm wearing all the Natalie hats, and Natalie gets to be a guest. So first, tell everyone, if you can, how do you see the tarot? Like when you think about tarot, what's the first thing that comes to mind? I kind of shared for me, it's intimidation and a lot of symbols, a lot of funky looking pictures that I'm just like, oh, that feels really like deep. So, So tell us.
The word that came to mind when you were asking that question immediately dropped in as an image, as a symbol, was key. For me, it's a key. It's a wisdom key. It's a key I've been shown very clearly in my study and in my relationship with the tarot as an entity, I guess, which we'll get into a little bit later. That sounds a bit mystical, which it is. But tarot is also a teacher for me. It's one of my absolute greatest teachers. I know this teacher will be with me for the whole rest of my life, that it's a lifelong journey for me in unlocking everything that the tarot has to teach and gift me and everyone else I come into contact with after I receive those gifts. So the key is so important because it's a key that unlocks inner wisdom. And when you go on a spiritual journey, this is something that makes it so exciting and mystical and invigorating and all of those amazing things. It's that we are simply awakening to our own wisdom and unlocking new levels of wisdom within us. And the tarot really helps to do that in like a fun way, actually. Once you move past that intimidation that you talked about, which is so common, and there's a few reasons that exists. One is around all the kind of myth and superstition around tarot. And then the other is because it is a codex. It's not something, like you said, like the oracle deck that kind of lets you completely be open with your intuition in how you interpret the meanings or sometimes even tells you just what the cards mean. So you can just play in that way. Oracle is very accessible, but the tarot is deeply encoded with many layers, many systems of symbolic meaning, ancient wisdom, technology. I could just go on and on. So, yeah, for me, ultimately, it's a key.
Oh, I love that. I love seeing it as a key because I know for me, when we had our first reading, we did this year ahead reading. So you're pulling cards and you can talk about what that looks like if you do something like that. But the wisdom that came out of just, and also this knowing, and honestly, it was like a huge confidence boost of like, oh my gosh, you know what you're doing. Like, here's this path that's been laid before you. And for me, it felt like like giving me a superpower cape, just
Mm.
of like, oh my gosh, here's these things you're working on. Here's how it like supercharged everything. That's kind of the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
And so having that key of like unlocking certain things of this is how you can see this, or this is how you can look at that. It was so powerful. And I couldn't believe, what the tarot brings out for people or shows
Yeah.
people. Yeah, just so magical. So that was a beautiful definition. So tell us before we jump into, I know you talk about major arcana and all those cards, and like I want to learn about that. How did you start with tarot? How did it find you? Because we know
Hmm.
it found you.
So true, it does. And there's lots of myths around this that tarot is supposed to find you through a magical auntie that gifts you a tarot deck, and that's one of the myths that it only works if you're gifted a deck from someone else. And
Oh,
it's
interesting.
I didn't know any of this stuff because I didn't have anyone particularly woo-woo or magical in my life. I'm kind of the pioneer of that in my family and my circles, but yeah, I loved going into spiritual bookshops and like crystal shops with books and decks and things like this. One day I bought a tarot deck, just a completely standard classic Rider Waite Smith deck, the kind of very typical tarot imagery, the original tarot imagery of any deck we see now. And with a lot of the things that I buy from the spiritual and crystal shops, they sit on my shelf for a really long time. I buy them knowing sometimes I immediately want to devour the book I've just bought or the deck, but often I'll buy them and then they sit there and they wait and I have to be ready. So at that point, I was ready to invite the tarot deck in, but I didn't even unwrap the plastic off that deck for probably 3 years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah. One day I just felt a calling to play with the cards and have a look at them. And then, interestingly, a couple of days later, my sister called me and she was talking about something she was thinking about doing in her life, like a pretty major decision. And she's like, "You have a tarot deck. Can you pull some cards for me?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I can pull some cards. I know what I'm doing." So it was really interesting. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'm like, I'll pull some cards, sure. And she was on the phone just listening and she was asking about a house. And very interestingly, I just pulled, one card because I wasn't even in the frame of mind to actually deal with multiple cards in like what you call a spread. I pulled one card and it was the Three of Pentacles. So the Three of Pentacles, and this is something I always do when I'm reading tarot, Heather, you would know because you watch me a lot. I love to explain the cards so that people understand what I'm seeing and what I'm decoding. So on that card, there are three people who are inside like an old church, like a cathedral. And they each dress very differently, but they hold a blueprint, and it's actually the only pentacles, and pentacle is the coin, so it corresponds with the element of earth and anything material. So obviously, coins is a lot to do with money, but it's very interesting because that's the only pentacles card that isn't like physical coins. It's a pattern of a coin of three circles with the pentagrams
Oh, is that what the
embedded.
ones that overlap each other and they're on the church,
Yes,
like
they're
the
in the
top of?
church.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
It's a pattern embedded in the stonework of the church. And so these people are all together essentially to collaborate and build something, but it's literally to do with like a physical building. And that kind of blew my mind because I was like, oh, hang on. And after I'm like, look, I don't know exactly what this means, but it was upside down and I don't think this is the right time. So I kind of just went with my intuition, working with the symbols and the image on the card. And that really started to get me curious because I was like, what are the odds that I get that card that's about a building and she's asking me about a house? And tarot can get it gets way more literal than that.
Mm-hmm.
And amazingly like just bang on, you know.
Yeah.
Often it's uncanny how literally the tarot can mirror back to you what you're asking about. So this wasn't even the most like amazing, incredible example of that mirror, but it
That was
was
your
an
first. That's really
yeah,
cool.
that was enough to be like, whoa, what is this? And so I would just play with the cards. Eventually, maybe a year after that, or two even, this was, yeah, probably about 2 years after that of just casual playing. This was during COVID. I decided that I wanted to learn tarot and I'd moved somewhere from the city to somewhere where there seemed to be quite a witchy vibe, you know, lots of spiritual people, lots of older hippies around. And I'm like, this seems like a place I can probably find someone. And I saw
Where
a
you can find your
woman,
tarot auntie.
yeah, my magical auntie, that's right. And I couldn't pick it any better. It was a woman, an amazing woman named Donna who was just a master with the tarot and such a fantastic teacher. And she practiced her lessons out of a gypsy wagon, this incredible gypsy wagon in her front yard in her house that was a few towns away. And so it was such a beautiful reprieve during our insane lockdowns that we had in Australia. I was in probably one of the most lockdown places in the whole world. But I was able to, during the breaks of those lockdowns, be able to go to this woman's gypsy wagon and learn tarot every week from her. So I did an apprenticeship, but I was in such a state at that time of discord, I guess you would say. I had a lot of nervous energy in my body and I found it very hard to shuffle. And I also, for some reason, didn't feel like practicing in between lessons. And I think she knew this. But at the same time, I was quite good at it. So it was never like you're not, you know, you're not doing your homework kind of thing. I was able to scrape by. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience. But I got to the end of that and then it turned out, you know, those physical symptoms where I was like shaking in my hands that I was both very nervy to be out in public after the intensity of all that lockdown stuff and also just having so much nervous energy that shuffling was very difficult. It took me a really long time to master shuffling. And many new students who come to me are very self-conscious about being able to shuffle in front of their teacher. And it's one of the first things I always say. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how you shuffle. Doesn't matter how you hold your cards. You can mix them up on the floor if you want. If that takes some of the stress out of it for you and the self-consciousness, just do whatever feels right. But I did learn to
Mm-hmm.
shuffle and got much more comfortable with holding the cards. And yeah, like I guess I graduated that, but went on a new journey of healing after getting diagnosed with autoimmune thyroid disease at that time. So I had a greater understanding of why that was so hard for me because I was like quite sick. But also, I incorporated tarot into my healing journey. That was around the same time that I was learning the Akashic Records. I had worked with Lorena from the Soul Tribe podcast and the Soul Tribe community, Lucia's sister, who's
Listen to our episode that we just released.
yeah, Lorena's also an Akashic Records reader, but also a flower therapist. So she introduced me to flower therapy. So in this incredibly pivotal time, I started doing my real learning with the tarot. I would read my Akashic Records every day after studying that. I would study flower therapy and work with the medicine of flower remedies every day. I would do channeling and I would practice tarot in a quite in-depth way, journaling every card that I pulled, drawing the tarot, doing my own interpretations, and really developing a very deep relationship with the cards and the symbols. And I think it's always really amazing to go through the process of learning the fundamentals, the foundations with a teacher, with a master who can pass on that kind of initiation. And you know, I love initiations.
Yep.
But the real learning doesn't begin until you meet the tarot where you're at and you start practicing. So that's really where my journey began of me becoming very connected and then increasingly confident in my ability to decode the messages that were coming through.
Oh, that is so good. You know, what you said about where your journey begins, because, you know, we talk about where people's spiritual journeys begin. That's a big topic on the podcast around
Yeah.
people feeling like, well, I've only been doing this for a couple years and I haven't been doing it for like, for 30 years and it's not multi-generational. So I
Yeah.
probably am not going to really be an expert until I'm 80. And then I can pass it down to someone. And I think this is such an important point just to remind people that you have these gifts. You've carried them with you through who knows how many lifetimes. So
Mm.
this is just an unlocking. Honestly, when we think about
Yeah.
the key of the tarot, it's an unlocking of this wisdom that already is inside of you. And
Yep.
so it's just reactivating what you already know. So if you're doubting something, you feel, I mean, we hear this all the time. Like, I can't do a reading for someone. I haven't been doing this long enough. I feel like I just learned. It's like riding a bike. It's like for
Mm.
many, and I'm sure this was probably your experience when you started doing this, it's like, oh my gosh, how I'm connecting with these cards. Not that you didn't put in the work, but that wisdom that started coming in, even your first card pull that you did for your sister, what a
Yeah.
cool story that, yeah, you don't have to have decades of experience to feel confident in using these tools, which I
Mm.
love. And one other thing, actually, two things I want to say, because I didn't want to interrupt you, but I certainly don't want anyone to think, because I did say I'm a total novice and know almost nothing. The only reason I know the Three of Pentacles card is because it came up in my reading. And I was like, wait, I
Yeah.
can visualize that card. That's probably one of the ones I can remember. And so that's
Yeah.
the only reason I knew to reference that. And then secondly, I also loved what you said about the tarot deck sitting around for 3 years and kind of waiting for that call. And I would encourage people to, if something's calling you, and not in like a shopaholic way, because it's very easy. We're so marketed to, especially if you're part of different spiritual apps and stuff where they're sending you
Mm.
stuff all the time. Like, we're having a sale on card decks. It can be, and I feel like this used to come up in the group, like, so and so has a sale today, like, go get this oracle deck. And all of a sudden you've got like a dozen oracle decks and you've never cracked one open.
Yeah.
um, don't necessarily do that. But if you do feel called to a deck, a tarot, oracle, whatever it might be, just don't beat yourself up if you get it and then you're not necessarily ready, but you felt this call
Mm.
to have it, because just like in this situation, if you hadn't have had it sitting around, you wouldn't have been able to do that for your sister and have this experience, and it just launched you on this journey. And
Yeah.
so know that if you're being called to something, it might not mean that you're supposed to go, all in right now in this moment, but the universe is kind of like preparing you. And I'm guessing if you thought about it, there probably were some like other little signs at some point that maybe came to you where it's like, okay, yeah, this is definitely something I'm meant to do.
Mm.
So I just wanted to share
Yeah.
that because I think that's important as I look over, and I think I have two decks that are still wrapped that I sometimes beat myself up. I come over to grab a deck and I'm like, oh, I should do that. But I need to do, an activation and initiation of the deck and kind of go through the process. And I don't have time for that and start going down this rabbit hole. And I'm like, I bought this deck like a year ago. So this makes me feel a lot better. So I'm thinking for others, if you bought that spiritual book or you've bought whatever,
Yeah.
know when it is the right time, you'll do it.
Yeah, totally. And the right time might be for you immediately, but you're not going to be an expert immediately or a master immediately. And I think we so often want to skip to that bit as well. The best learning, the most amazing kind of just explosions of new knowledge have come through play. It's the best. It's how children learn, through
It's the
play and
flow because you're in the flow.
experimentation. Exactly, in that flow state, in a very pure way without any expectations. So, again, it's something that I do with my students. I guide them through the processes of making those connections, and we've been really able to fast track it by making it more playful, less pressure, less structure, less rules, and more curiosity, more play, more exploration.
That's so interesting about even the intimidation when we think about starting these things, these small micro things that would never have occurred to me, like to
Oh,
be
yeah.
intimidated because I just, yeah, shuffle cards. I never thought about it, but it's interesting that for others, do you feel it's because sometimes cards jump out? And so if someone, is like, well, I never get jumpers, which is like basically
Mm,
when you're shuffling and a card like flies out of the deck, which I love
yeah.
when that happens, and it happens all the time because you're like, oh, this card needs to be seen.
Yeah.
But why do you think that is? Because that feels like such an elementary part of like, it's not even looking at the cards. It's literally just
Yeah.
getting ready.
Yeah. Well, I think if you have grown up or as an adult, you play card games, like, normal deck of cards, or
Yep.
you go to the casino, you know how to play poker. You're comfortable and familiar with a card deck. And ultimately that's all that tarot is. So some people are super comfortable with shuffling. Other people like me, I've never really been into card games and I've got little hands and, some card decks are quite big and I found them really difficult. Cards, often when you first get them out, you would probably know this too, Heather, they're often very shiny and slippery and they're all clumped together. And so even to get the cards with a little bit of grip so they're easy to shuffle takes a while.
Yeah.
And I think some people are really scared of doing things wrong. Other people have seen people on the internet do it this way, and I feel like I'm not as good as them because I'm not getting those jumpers. I have to
That
pick
makes
every
sense.
card manually. Other times it's just this feeling of discomfort, like, oh, I don't feel confident shuffling or holding these cards, working with these cards. That might be the first barrier that you have to work through and overcome, like gaining that comfort. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That just stuck out to me and I wrote it down. So it felt like it needed to be addressed. And I think that is probably it, is that getting over that imposter syndrome of like, am I really doing this? Like, I have these
Mm,
cards. I might be, pulling something for myself that maybe I'm scared to find out or
yeah.
nervous or maybe excited, but still at the same time, this is like the beginning. So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And that
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
intimidation thing
Hmm.
as well, a lot of people have questions. Actually, someone from your community or a shared community reached out to me to talk about this, and I hope she's okay with me sharing it. But it was a really good question because there's a lot of people who have a superstitious or even religious outlook on the tarot or
Hmm.
opinions about the tarot that it's evil or it's blasphemous.
Right.
It is scary, it's going to open portals for all kinds of energies to come in. And, that's possible with anything. Mirrors can be portals. Like but
Artwork, anything. Yeah.
yeah,
Everything has energy.
yeah, exactly. And the cards can also have no energy if you don't want to put it in there too. So, they can just remain those pieces of paper. But as far as that, I think some people have a real trepidation as well to play with the cards, even in a playful way, not trying to like get like really intense messages about other people, because there's those superstitions around. And I actually do have a lot of respect for people who have beliefs that are based on their own spirituality, whether that's religious or otherwise, that they don't like the tarot and don't believe it's good to play with. That's their right, and that's totally fine. Like I'm not offended by that or anything. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think
mm,
that's the first thing. When I think of the tarot, I think of dark, like that it
mm,
feels dark. And I think it's because some of the images, yeah, I'm not sure why I feel that there, it honestly, I feel like it's because I'm not educated, because it's the unknown. And
yep,
so most of the time we take all of the things that are much more headline grabbing out there of the tarot and yeah, it's like a witchy kind of tool. So I do think it's important to kind of talk about some of these things because it is a beautiful, magical tool that is not something you need to be scared of. So I
yeah.
guess of all the messages to get today, I hope that comes through loud and clear because it is such an amazing portal to open up other things, inside of you.
Yeah. And there's a really important point here, whether this is you having to confront your own fear around anything to do with those superstitious beliefs around tarot, or you're working with a reader. It's all about intention, and intention holds the energy. So that dark word is very important because there are some dark cards in the tarot, but in my way of learning, understanding, and teaching, cards like the death card, the devil card can actually be neutralized. They are neutral. And what they evoke in us is a mirror, right? So if they come up, they're showing us something we're afraid of and asking us to confront that. So there is some darkness there, but I also think that there's, especially like, traditionally in the media and stuff, there is a bit of darkness around telling the future. And
Hmm.
again,
Yeah.
if you've followed my work, you know that I don't believe in tarot as a fortune telling tool. It's much more important than that. That I think is almost a subversion to make it seem like something that it's not or minimize the incredible good that it can do, to make it seem very blasphemous because only God can know the future, right?
Right.
And also, when we give someone the power to tell us our future, some people can tell you that your husband's going to leave you or that you're going to
You're
die.
giving your
You're going to
power
get,
away. Yeah.
you're giving your power away. And for me, it's always about empowerment. Even hard messages that come through, sometimes really hard truths come through. It's always my intention to empower with that message and to deliver it as gently and as helpfully and with the most empowerment as I possibly can. So, yes, the darkness is so much to do with our shadow and also the collective shadow. And the tarot, if we can confront that, can
Hmm.
teach us so much and help us so much with that shadow work.
Awesome. I'm glad we're talking about this because I think these are some of the stumbling blocks to why someone might not have explored this before. Like me, I can speak from my
Mm.
own experience. So okay, so let's go into, should we talk about the cards?
So let's talk about that. So I mentioned before the deck that I got was the original tarot deck. So it was created by a man called Arthur Rider-Waite and it was illustrated by a woman called Pamela Coleman Smith. So it was kind of like a joint effort between these two. And basically they brought together two different card games that had become divination tools used by mystics. So the tarot had come from this card game called tarocchi from Italy and evolved over, 150 or so years
Hmm.
through France, Western Europe, England, and then America. And so this was created by these two sort of esoteric figureheads. Actually, it might even be like 1907 or something. I probably should know this off the top of my head, but
This is why I love you because Natalie knows all these facts about things and we talked about before this not going into the history because that could be like a whole episode.
yeah,
But I love
this
that
is
you
the
know this
short
because
version.
yeah, exactly. Because like if you ask me, oh, when did Oracle cards come around? Because I use them, I'd be like, I have absolutely no idea. They could have been around for like 1,000 years or like in the last 30 years. I really have no
Yeah.
idea. So I
Honestly,
love that you have this knowledge.
Oracle cards are probably easy to track back because tarot, some people are like, tarot came from the Egyptians. Some people like
Oh,
tarot came from India. It's my perspective that tarot evolved from card games from Europe that people used for entertainment. And then with anything, you can use dice and make them a divination tool. You
yeah.
can have a pen and paper that's used for just writing and it becomes something mystical. So people eventually started using the cards in different ways. And basically, what Arthur Rider-Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith did was bring together two different types of card games. One was the Major Arcana called the Trump cards, and then the Minor Arcana called the Pip cards. And they brought it together into this one big deck and made this like holistic system. And I really do believe, even if there weren't ancient Egyptians carrying around these card decks to play with,
Mm,
the symbols, the esoteric wisdom that they carried filtered down
yeah.
through whatever means, whether it was encoded in DNA or genetics or through storytelling or ancient tablets and whatever else, all of those things reached the people who made this card deck. This card deck is so rich in symbols from so many different cultures. I don't even think you can actually pinpoint the one origin. I know where this one particular style of deck came from. And
Yeah.
this, I'm actually using a modern stylized version. So this is a deck called the Aquarius Tarot by this illustrator and artist called Don Aquarius. And this is the deck I work with in my readings.
It looks very like
It's
60s.
yeah. Yeah, it's
Age
really
of the
fun.
Aquarius. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm usually quite a purist when it comes to my tarot decks. I'm not into the kind of real modern ones, which some people might have a problem with because there's not much diversity in the original tarot deck. It's very old fashioned. However, it's what I choose to work with. And I understand if people don't want to, but it's what I choose to work with because it holds those original keys. And I think the intention of creating like modern versions of that deck. So you can go into a spiritual store and just see walls of different, definitely oracle decks, but even like immensely different versions of tarot of all kinds of themes to the point now where we're getting like movie and TV show based tarot decks For
Oh,
me,
wow.
yeah, there's like Golden Girls tarot deck, and like really,
Interesting.
there's
I'd like to
many.
see that just for entertainment purposes, but yeah.
Exactly. It's pretty fun, right? I'm not begrudging anyone who chooses to work with those cards, but for me, I do feel like there's also been a bit of a campaign of subversion of the
Mm,
original intention of this deck. And for that reason, I'm quite picky and discerning with the tarot decks that I choose to work with for myself, because I'm always thinking about those things. So this deck is pretty close to the original artwork, and the artwork really resonates with me. But I think that's the very first thing. If you walk into a store and you're thinking about working with the tarot, learning tarot, playing with tarot, exploring tarot, I definitely think it's great if you are seriously wanting to learn. You start with that original deck. It's usually in a yellow box, and it will have that artwork that's very familiar. And if you pick up any book, pretty much it teaches you about tarot, it uses that particular artwork of that original deck. So if you can understand how to read the imagery and the symbols of that deck, you can kind of read any deck. But if you start with a highly stylized deck, it can be harder to read other decks. So I just
right.
wanted to put that out there. But when you walk into a shop, it's so important to resonate with the artwork. So if you pick up the original deck and you're like, I hate this, it's awful.
That was
But
me.
there's
I
another
saw it
one.
and I was like, my friend told me about it. Emily told me, she was like, "Oh, I have this deck. This is the deck I use." And I was like, "Oh, like I don't like that." It didn't resonate, and it felt a little like dark to me. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that feels not good." So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I look at the cards very differently now, but years ago, I did have that feeling.
And that's totally fair, because other times you need a gateway into it as well.
Yeah.
Some people mightn't ever work with that original deck, and that's totally okay. Like I said, most decks are based and very closely matching that artwork. It's just modernized in some way. But yeah, I think there's also a space for, I'm not a collector of decks. Like I don't have 75 different decks. I
Hmm.
honestly have maybe 4 tarot decks, and I only really work with 2. Um, but they play different roles. So for me, I'm all about that empowerment and that uplifting of the tarot. So I'm naturally drawn to the more bright kind of fun artwork like this deck.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, everyone's different and there's no right or wrong way to do it. That's a really important thing.
Yeah. And thank you for clarifying that. And exciting news is that we are getting YouTube set up. So you'll be
Yeah.
able to, if you're listening to this in a podcast format, know that you can also go to YouTube. So as Natalie is showing these cards, you'll be able to go see actual video.
Yeah.
But one thing I just wanted to go back to quick
Yeah.
is when you were talking about like the Golden Girls deck. So I
Yeah.
love, we do this all the time where we share our perspectives. I
Yes.
was wondering if it's a way to pull people in mainstream that otherwise are intimidated by the tarot to say, hey, look, it's Blanche and the girls. And, you don't have to be intimidated. And where it
Yeah.
might, as much as it feels maybe icky to like commoditize it in that way, because I get that. It feels like
Yeah.
we just from a material perspective, anytime we can slap a new like trademarked something or other on it and then, double the price, like great.
Mm.
That's the American way. But also, I wonder if it's a way to catch someone's attention where it doesn't feel as intimidating, where it's like, oh, I could do tarot with the Golden Girls. Like, okay,
Yeah.
and then it brings them into this more exploration. And then I wonder if that ends up translating for people to be more open to it. So I just wanted to mention that
Mm.
because I thought it was interesting that you said that. And I get the purist when you're not going to be doing readings with, that kind of deck. But
That's a really good perspective, actually, because I'm usually always like wearing my tinfoil hat and go straight to the conspiracy of the Matrix overlords. But we don't always have to think that way, and you're actually really right. One of the things that maybe I have a problem with those contemporary mainstream decks, and I think you tapped on something for sure about the intellectual property side of things, because the trademark of the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck has expired. So no one owns it anymore. Anyone really can print the original artwork if they wanted to. I think the US game systems who owned that have trademarked the name Rider-Waite Tarot. So you can't call it that, but you can reproduce, as far as I'm aware, the artwork. But that's probably why, as soon as that expired, all of a sudden we have all these different decks. So
Yeah.
that's a very interesting point that you make. But going back to the real point, which is about
Yeah.
accessibility and
Yeah.
like reaching more people and opening them up in a more like playful and safe way. I think that's definitely true. And I actually should think about it that way a bit more because that's really exciting. It probably might be a way to filter people out too who aren't supposed to be playing with the tarot. I do think anyone can do it, like it's for everyone, but everyone's not for the tarot.
Yeah.
So that
I
might be
feel
enough
it.
for you, and that's cool. But the reason why I wouldn't choose those cards normally is because they would probably be missing some of the more powerful symbols. So it's going to be quite surface level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for humoring me on that one.
Yeah. All
Okay,
good.
so why don't you educate us a little bit on the cards? So you've already mentioned major arcana, minor arcana. Yeah, what does all that mean?
Yeah. So the major arcana and the minor arcana, let me take it a step back because all of this stuff can sound like really overwhelming. But the way that I've been able to develop a really amazing way, and I'm just going to take full credit here, of teaching
100% you should. Yeah.
yeah, of teaching the tarot because I really am fast tracking people. It's a system of systems. There are almost infinite systems within the tarot. And so it starts as at this first level of systems being the tarot deck. And then you can break that in half and you've got the major arcana, which is the amazing big outwardly macro reflection. And then you've got the minor arcana, which is much more inner world personal, like the micro. So that's that. Then you've got numerology. So that's a system. Within the minor arcana, you have 4 suits. So all of a sudden you get elemental correspondence as a system. So you've got the swords, the wands, the cups, and the pentacles, each representing swords air, wands fire, cups water, pentacles earth. So you have that system. You have systems of color theory. You have systems of esoteric languages like Hermetic law. You've got Kabbalah, the very complex systems of esoteric symbolism. And when we talk about esoteric symbolism, we're talking hidden symbolism, hidden systems of knowledge that are usually you're initiated into, but anyone can learn it. You just have to have that curiosity. There are all sorts of symbols of nature. There's people, analyzing the people. You can analyze body language as a system. It's just infinite. Like, did I say astrology? Astrology
No.
correspondence is in there. Alchemy correspondence. Flags. Flags is a language. It's the language of symbols, just systems of languages of symbols. So,
Hence why I'm intimidated. This is a lot.
and I know you. You're a perfectionist, right? So you think I've got to master all
Yeah,
of these
I have to know
systems.
all of this. This is like, whoo. Okay.
This is what's amazing about the tarot. And this is why I'm able to help fast track people with learning it. It's because I've now realized that you just have to start with the systems that you already have an interest in and you get to learn so quickly. So obviously, there's some foundational systems of the tarot. That's kind of what I teach in my foundations course, and some very basics of decoding just general symbols. Beyond that, where you go deep with your own practice and your own learning is exploring those areas that are really like interesting to you. So if you think astrology is super interesting, don't worry about learning all the other systems. Learn the basics. Learn the difference between the major and minor. Learn the difference between the suits, those elemental suits. Learn the difference between the characters of the court cards. Learn the basics of the numerology, and then go nuts on whichever system. For me, I studied art when I was at university. I studied photography, which is just compositions of symbols, right? And so for me, I applied my understanding of art theory, color theory, composition. When I realized that I was already super familiar with that, I was used to decoding images and extracting meaning. So I was able to use my existing knowledge and existing interest and apply it to tarot. Some people might be way more into science and learning about alchemy and alchemical symbols and the journey, the symbolic journey of alchemy, say through the Fool's journey of the Major Arcana might be super interesting. Oh, one that's fantastic is myth. If you love myth and story, just start there. Don't worry about don't worry about the astrology, don't worry about the color theory. Just start where you're interested in and the world opens up. It will teach you so much.
Okay. So you mentioned the court cards. So
Yes.
so there's like king, queen, jester.
That's right.
Is there a jester
There's
or
the
no?
king, the queen, the knight,
Okay.
and the page.
Oh, page. Okay. Not a
Yep.
jester. Okay.
No, it's good that some decks, and this is the thing, some decks, in the many decks you can choose from, interpret things differently. So say the page, people are like a bit upset that there's not a more equal gender balance in the tarot, which is fine. And so in modern decks, often you'll see the page as the princess, you know. And so there's a girl, and then the knight's a boy, and then, you know, you've got the queen a woman, and then the king a man. So there's a bit more of a balance there. The jester is a member of the court, the royal court. And when we talk about the royal court, these are people within royalty that have jobs, right? So these are characters doing specific jobs in the tarot, like in
So
this house of leadership.
so what's the fool? Is that outside of the court?
Yes, the Fool is
Okay.
a very important card because it's card 0 of the Major Arcana. It's the very inception point. And so when we think of the Fool, I'll talk about the image first, if I can find it. The Fool is showing a person who's kind of androgynous. It's usually a dude in the tarot, but it also can look like a woman, and often is a woman in the newer decks, who is going on a journey. He or she is, we'll say he, because I work with the original tarot, is happily like about to leave, you know, for an amazing sojourn, has worldly possessions in a little, you know, bag on a stick.
Which we would
They're
say here
trusting.
that's like a hobo, like that, which is a terrible
Yeah.
word, but it is just something just to give you the image of your mind of like when we think about old school, like you have the stick with your little bag tied to it, and that's how you were
Yes.
traveling.
Yeah. So not much baggage is coming with you, right? At this
Right.
inception point, right? You've got your trusty companion, this beautiful white little dog, that dog that
Oh,
reappears throughout the
fox.
journey. And their heads in the clouds, basically. They're just so excited to go on their journey, not a care in the world, except they're about to tumble off a cliff. They're not looking where they're going, and they're going to drop into what's going to become their journey. You know, they have no idea what they're in store for. So the Fool's a very important card, but the Fool, what does the Fool represent? Someone foolish, naive, you know, also pure. But yeah, going back to the court cards, the
Yep.
court cards are cards that people find really challenging. So there's 4 characters and they sit across each suit. So there's actually 16 court cards in total because there's 4 swords, there's 4 cups, there's 4 wands, and there's 4 pentacles. So these characters each represent something different in correspondence with their elements. So people get really stuck, including myself when I got to the court cards. But if we see them as archetypal teachers, it's quite easy to understand what the king and the queen represent in that like mature, realized masculine and feminine leadership. But people get a bit more caught up with, say, the knight, and then definitely with the page. So I kind of like break them down by age. You've got these like mature leaders with the king and the queen who balance each other out with those leadership characteristics. The knight is like the 18-year-old guy who's just gotten it. Well, we get our license at 18 in Australia. So he's just gotten his license. He feels like a big grown man. He's going to go and take some risks. He's brave. He's not afraid of anything. He thinks he knows it all. But with that can come a bit of arrogance and
Yeah.
excessive risk taking that can have consequences. So big learning stage. And the page is kind of like is that time between child and teenager where all of a sudden you're just old enough to start getting exposed to your first responsibility, your first taste of responsibility, and also what it is to be an adult, because ultimately an adult is a creator of their reality. There's no one in your field doing that for you by the time that you've graduated to adult. So This is the page in the court. We know what a king does. We know what a queen does. We know what a knight does. A knight goes to battle.
Sure.
They're very courageous. They're fearless. But the page is a messenger. The page was the most trustworthy little boy who would take the message from the royal court to whoever it needed to go to. They would run very quick. And that was quite a respectable role, right? There's a lot of trust that needs to be there. So that first taste of responsibility, which means that the page is very curious. There's a lot of curiosity there, a lot of learning through observation, watching the world around and like figuring stuff out, and it's sparking like inspiration and all of these beautiful things. So yeah, you asked specifically about the court cards. So if anyone out there was struggling with those, think of them as archetypal teachers and break down their characteristics of their jobs, I guess.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you, again, going back to perspective, how we see things, I would see if I got a page card knowing, about a hierarchy of like, okay, we know king, which has its mastery, kind of at this top.
Yeah.
If I got the page, I'd be like, oh, I'm just like at the bottom rung here. Like, why am I getting this card? But how you've opened it up to say you're exploring, you're trusted, like you're a trusted messenger. That's an important job. It's just shifting the perspective. So it just, had me reframe this and seeing it as a hierarchy of like, you have to move up. It's more, you can be in this exciting time of like learning and building trust and those types of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that's really important with the tarot. There's no good or bad, People can be like the devil. That's an evil card. People really get scared when this comes up because like, what's this telling me about myself? But it's actually quite a clear message, because if we look at this card, if you take your feeling that it's bad out of it and you just look at the artwork and come at it with a completely neutral intention, because all imagery is neutral. It's just what we're told.
For you.
Yeah, what we're taught, the programs we develop or inherit from society, from our parents, whatever it might be, our family, our community. Especially if you grow up religious, this is going to mean some really heavy stuff. It's very loaded. But if we can just take ourselves out, there's some really powerful symbolism in this card. You've got the devil who's perched on this plinth, who is doing some quite like esoteric symbols with his hand. It's devoid of light. They seem to be in this kind of cave. And at his feet are what look to be Adam and Eve in their complete nakedness.
Yep.
And they have little devil horns on. So they've kind of sold themselves a bit. They've sold themselves out. They're not in their highest, vibration, I would say. They're in the shadow right now. And it's interesting because Adam's looking up at the devil and Eve is like facing us. She's like looking in the mirror.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And if we look at what's happening with these two, they have chains around their neck that are tethered to the plinth that the devil sits on. However, the chains are big enough that they could take them off themselves. They're not freeing themselves. They're keeping themselves imprisoned. What's imprisoning us
stuck.
when these... Yes.
Yeah.
And not just that, they're self-sabotaging, So when this card comes off, it's not that you're evil or that you're possessed or anything like this. It's showing you, what are you prioritizing? What are your behavioral patterns that are unhealthy right now? For some people, it can be about addiction. It can be about unhealthy habits. It can be also about taboos, because there's some bondage here as well, So it's stuff that we can feel chained to that we're not willing to let go of, That could be people, that could be behaviors, that could be things in our past that we keep like in the dark. Yeah. So once we start learning to unpack all of the parts of the images on the page, we can actually take some of the fear out of it and just start working with the messages, working with the lessons. And that's one of the best ways to work with tarot. When I, reflecting on my journey, when I said I was going through that healing journey and reading tarot every day, it was journaling with the cards. It was literally sitting there writing, I can see the devil. Today what's standing out is that his hand symbol. I'm going to go research the hand symbol and write down what I learn about it. When I'd get a card, I wouldn't go straight to the book. I would actually sit with it and see what it had to teach me and what I could learn and unpack on my own. And I'd go to the book for that validation or to learn something new to get an extra layer. So there's so much we can do, like just on our own, with especially with the cards we're scared of, like actually working with them. I remember I had a student who was terrified of this card, and I said, you're going to put it up somewhere where it can stand upright for a week, and it's going to sit there for a week, and you're going to see what it's here to teach you. And we'll see how afraid you are of this card by the end of the week. And it taught a lot.
Yeah, I can
And the
imagine.
fear had been confronted and was dissolved. Yeah.
Which is the beautiful thing about shadow work. We bring it into the light so that it can see the light, and then we can resolve it or work
Yeah.
on whatever it is we're supposed to work on. Yeah, that's super cool. And so I wanted to circle back with what you said about not going right to the book, because I do think that is most people's tendency, and giving yourself, just like with anything, just a couple minutes of quiet reflection. When people are like, well, I'm not going to get messages. I don't get messages. I've never gotten a, download or whatever. What even is that? I think it's because we don't give ourselves the space. It's right away. I need to know what it is. I need to go Google something. I need to look this up. And it's like, if you can put your phone away, if you can just sit quietly and look at the card and, like you said, have it teach you, I think it probably would blow most people's minds what comes in. And you might think of it as, I'm making this up, it's my imagination. That's okay. You can think that, but that's how you get the messages. That's what's coming in, is giving you these insights. And even when Natalie and I had a reading, I remember, I know nothing about tarot. This literally was my first experience. And you were seeing things that you hadn't seen before. And you're like,
Yeah.
this is teaching me something else, that when you talk about how you've studied these cards and worked with these cards so intimately, to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, it feels like it's this consummate teacher where there's always a lesson, and there'll always be one thing that you might gravitate towards that I might see. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I never saw the perspective again. And it's really just that teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the joy of reading for other people. I think Lucia, in our episode with her, spoke about this as well, that you learn so much from the readings you do for others, that's quite a gift, because when you start doing tarot for yourself, it's like I said, it's a mirror, right? And so often you'll see patterns. So similar or the same card will reappear over and over until you've kind of worked with what it's there to reveal to you. But it means that there's some cards, there are a lot of cards in the deck, and there's some cards that you never even see, like until you do a reading for someone else, and they've got different things to unpack. And all of a sudden you get to see a card that you perhaps haven't worked with as intimately, and you get to learn from that other person. The other part of that is, you mentioned not going to the book straight away, and that's really important, because the reason why I recommend people don't do that is because the tarot gets really repetitive and very boring very, very quickly. Once you start playing a lot and you do readings for yourself, you start doing readings for other people, if all you've done is memorize someone else's opinion of what the cards mean, even if it's the authors of the tarot deck themselves, you're just going to be repeating it. There's going to be nothing new revealed unless you're open to that whenever you're pulling a card. And so this is what's so beautiful and magical about it. If you're willing to work with the cards just at where they're at, and where you're at, as your knowledge, as your interest evolves about the tarot, different systems of the tarot, different aspects of the artwork, whatever you might be learning from that validation step with the books and other people's opinions, that's great too. So I'm not saying don't ever look at a book. It's not about that. What I'm saying is ask yourself first. Allow yourself, just as you said, Heather, the space to decode the card or have a go at decoding the card on your own before you go to the book or before you go to the website. Because you're probably going to find, at first, you might be getting basic answers, and what you're going to be really enthralled about is that the book's going to validate some of what you're seeing and figuring out for yourself. And that's going to be really good for your confidence, because you'll start to trust your intuition. So tarot is a fantastic tool, a key for training the intuition and unlocking the intuition. But then you'll start to work more with what you're seeing in the cards, and you'll find the book or the website a bit less helpful. And so then you might start getting books about certain systems, astrology in the tarot. And that's what's interesting, not just the basic how to read tarot book, because you've kind of clock that already. And it's actually more interesting just to figure out things beyond the basics on your own. I think this is why I love working with the symbols, because the other thing is pressure around having to understand the whole picture all in one go. And you don't actually have to do that. I know, Heather, like a lot of the time in my readings, and also when I'm doing live streams, I will sit with a card and ask the card to show me what symbol wants to be seen today. Sometimes it jumps straight out and I don't have to ask. I'm like, oh, this, like, the crown on the high priestess's head is like really speaking to me today. Or the veil behind her, it feels very thin. Let's talk about this. And this is the cool part, because you were talking about those downloads coming in, those messages, rather than going to your intellectual mind to either remember or interpret intellectually what you're seeing, you're just sitting in the stillness. A symbol appears, or an element of this artwork appears, and then you're curious and more information comes in. So that might be an immediate message that something happened to me many times before, something really odd that I would never have thought about if I was just trying to regurgitate the textbook meaning.
Right.
Other times, it can be like there's no message, but it's an invitation for you to kind of go deeper into the cards. Okay, well, nothing specifics coming through right now. Let's sit with this symbol a bit more. Let's think about what the crown symbolizes and why is that important right now? Can it be an activation of the upper chakras? Can it be, you know, a symbol of leadership and respect? You know, you can go on the intellectual paths, but having that space to let the wisdom drop in or emerge from within before you go to like the thinking mind is very powerful. And that's also a great way to kind of train your intuition too.
So let's talk about, we could do like a 5-hour episode. I think this will be like a multi-part. We'll dig into some other things. And we actually have an episode planned to talk with someone specifically about how she uses just the archetypes, how she has really gone deep, which I love what you're saying, astrology, numerology. If those are things that resonate with you, I love that the tarot can be a part of that journey, and you can go deep on that, and that can be kind of the thing for you. So 2 things. So quickly tell us about, if someone's thinking about a reading, what's important to think about. And it's probably similar to other guests we've had on with, if you're going to do a reading with someone who does tarot. And then also just quickly tell us about your school, the tarot school that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're wanting to get a reading, the first thing that's really important is that you get a good vibe from the person that you're getting a reading from. So you really do want to like make sure, whether it's just through their branding or how they present themselves on social media, or you might have gotten a recommendation from someone else, or you just like their style. But if you get any kind of, I'm not even saying that they're putting out bad vibes, but if you don't have a fit with them, if you don't resonate, don't worry, keep looking. It's not the right time, or it's not the right person. That's the first thing. Sometimes there are people, like I said, who are quite responsible in how they do tarot, and they can be a bit like callous in their delivery of messages and stuff. So, ideally, if you can have a recommendation, that's great. But even not, just trust your intuition. And if you get a bad vibe, just avoid. The second thing is then your responsibility. So going into the reading, it's really good to know what your question is. Some readers hate if you go and don't have a question. I'm not like that, because I feel like there's 2 reasons you go to see a tarot reader. The first is that there's something really big happening in your life and you want some clarity or some insight or some help in either making a decision or getting some answers or figuring out your next steps. That's really common, and you're going to be quite clear on your question. If that's your scenario, try not to make it about other people. Try to make it about you. There's a lot of people come in, and I've had some doozies, like, I broke up with my boyfriend and I want to know if he's jealous about me, like if he's jealous of me, or does he want me back? Right, and it's like, the tarot is not actually going to show me that. It might, but then I've got to figure out how to deliver that to you in a way that's helpful. It's going to mirror back to you why that's important to you. Why are you so obsessed with your ex wanting you? Right. That's what the tarot is going to want to talk about. It's going to go straight to that shadow work. Yeah. Sometimes we can have really positive things happening in our life too, and we want to make the most aligned choice for ourselves. I've got some amazing opportunities and I don't know which way to go.
Or if you
Readers
have
just,
like what you do with the year ahead, like with what
yeah.
we've done, I love that it's kind of like helping. It's such a, like I said, it's really empowering. Like this beautiful, here's the gift of like what this year is going to bring, especially when we're talking about difficult times and we have some challenges and it might be like, oh
Mm,
my gosh, my year is already not maybe off to a great start. I feel like it can be so cool how you do the year ahead. And maybe you could share quickly like what that looks like because you have four kind of things that you're looking at when you do the year ahead, right?
yeah. The year ahead also, it's not just for the start of the year, it's also great for birthdays. Or if you're just in a
Yeah,
in a
love it.
time of transition and you want a
Yep.
12-month guidance, like a almost like a plan.
Yes, it doesn't have to be
Um
our calendar year. Yeah, I
yeah.
should say that. It
Yeah.
could be wherever you are today, which we're
Yep.
recording this in May. And it could
Yep.
be, I want from now, like, what should I know
Yeah.
about this upcoming next cycle?
Cycle,
So, yeah,
exactly.
important. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
And the way I've designed them is because this is the other scenario. A lot of people will be like, I haven't had a reading in a while. I feel like I'm open to it. I've got nothing in particular to ask, but
Hmm.
I've either come across this reader and I get a good vibe or I think it might be fun. That's actually really lovely. Some readers get really frustrated by that, but as long as I always ask, do you have something specific in mind or is this just a vibe check? And if they're like vibe check, I'll be like, great. It's on me to bring the guidance to you. If it's a specific question, it's on you to actually ask what you want to know so that you get the answers that you're seeking. The cards will just be prompting the answers to come from within you.
Yeah.
If you don't look for answers from other people because you're not going to get what you want to hear. And that is something that
Ooh.
people come to tarot readers for a lot. They come to get validation that the bad decisions they're making are right, and you're not going to get it.
Feels like a
um,
mic drop moment.
But yeah, the year ahead reading. So basically, knowing when people are just wanting a vibe check, I've designed a specific spread for them where I pull four cards and they arrive in different order depending on the reading and who I'm reading for. But I'll be looking at the physical forecast, the emotional forecast, the spiritual forecast, and the mental forecast. So I'll look at those four sort of elements.
Yeah. Areas
And
of life,
yeah,
areas
yeah,
of
I
us.
mean, they are elemental.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'll look at those areas of life and I'll pull at least four. Usually there's more cards that come out. Sometimes it makes a nice kind of double-ended diamond or double pyramid. So yeah, I work a lot with shapes and symbols, obviously. So instead of having intellectual placements for cards, that's kind of why I don't work with other people's spreads because I have to think too much. It drops me out of like my intuition and into my thinking brain.
Yeah.
I intuit these things, but everyone's different. So that's the other thing. If the style of the tarot reader, you're like, I don't know why they do it that way. I want someone a bit more traditional. Go for it. Find what resonates with you. But just be clear on what you're seeking. And if you're either asking someone to solve all your problems or you are asking someone to tell you what's going to happen in the future exactly to the date,
Mhm.
or if you are wanting validation for things you know are bad that you're choosing for yourself or how you're treating others aren't that bad, don't get a reading. It's not the right time. And if you go get a reading, be prepared for some hard truths to pop up that mirror to you what you need to work on. So always come at it from the most, doesn't have to be optimistic. We can be seeking tarot readings when really bad stuff's going down in our lives, but come at it prepared to work on some stuff, to get some answers, to potentially see some hard truths and take action, or at least ponder, sit with, contemplate, ponder. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So important. Really good learnings there. Okay, and then just your tarot school. So tell us if someone actually is already into the tarot and maybe
Mm.
wants to go deeper or explore what that is.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely grab a tarot deck and just one book, even if it's a booklet in the tarot deck, or one website that you trust that you like the vibe of, and play and then seek a teacher like me. So if you want to work with me, you can find me at crystalauratarot.com. It's the home of the Crystal Aura Tarot School. So I offer online courses. I'll have a new round coming up very soon. So if you're interested, there's a waitlist on my website. You can go check it out. I'll pop the link in the show notes. But it's a 12-week container where we learn the fundamentals of tarot in such a deep way that it's truly a fast track to tarot mastery. And when you come out of it, you'll feel confident reading for other people, not just yourself. So you don't necessarily have to go in there to train as a tarot reader, as a business, or even for other people. Tarot is an incredibly powerful tool just for you to carry in your life's journey. However, you will feel confident reading for other people by the time you're finished. So I also offer one-on-one tarot training containers that I design specifically based on your interests, knowledge, and what your kind of learning objectives are. So if that sounds interesting, reach out. I'd love to chat. But otherwise, I would love to have some new faces in the next round of Tarot Foundations.
Yay. And yeah, and it could be this thing that you just want to explore for yourself. So I know for me, you've heard some of my journeys with the Akashic Records and in other modalities where I didn't do it as a means to do readings for others, but sometimes people just fall into these things. That's what opens it up. And so even just all the learnings you can learn about yourself, I think is so powerful and such a key point of doing any of these things. But it sounds like especially with the tarot. So yay, I feel like we just scratched the surface. There's so many other places. I still have like a huge laundry list of questions, but I want to make sure this episode doesn't go too long and we don't lose anyone. So I think, plan that there will definitely be a part 2 so we can do some deeper dives. But I know that this was a really good intro. Hopefully it helped people feel less intimidated by the tarot and will, maybe if they are tarot curious, they'll go check it out, check out your website. And as you can hear, Natalie's obviously has a beautiful way of sharing the tarot with people. And I think even if there are some difficult messages, how she delivers it is just, it's just amazing. So I highly, highly recommend it. But,
I'm also offering readings. So if you like, if you like my vibe and want a reading, I'll pop the booking link in the show notes as well. You can find that on my website too.
Yeah, awesome. And we will put all of that here so you can find it all easily and connect with us and connect with Natalie. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you, Natalie, for teaching us today in a really accessible way. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm so grateful for you too. And I really appreciate the space to share one of my biggest passions.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Until next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.